Good news! I saw Lord Squeakington yesterday.
The man is Heinrich Kramer, and he is writing the most blood-soaked book of the 15th century, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch's Hammer, a book that would torment the world for a century after its release, and be responsible for the torture and death of 70,000 innocent people.
Treating of three necessary concomitants of witchcraft, which are the devil, a witch, and the permission of Almighty God.
He goes on to say that female empowerment would bring on the apocalypse. He even made the title of the book Female, to hammer home his point. Malleus Maleficarum is a hammer used only on women.
So, we must find the mark. We must find the mark.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, located not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is hiding from me because today was flea medicine day, and he does not like when I put his flea medicine on him. And Lord Squeakington was lurking about the other day, so he's still alive. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. And this is a Hex and Hammer episode where Skullbeard and I read selections from the Medieval Witch Hunting Manual. Next episode will be a news show episode. Just a bit of a heads up for folks, but there's a very good chance after next week that my posting schedule will be a little more erratic than it has been. I know I'm not always able to get episodes up on Sundays, but given that we're going to be putting in more overtime at work starting on the 13th of the month, I'm going to find myself a bit squeezed for time. I also don't know how long the overtime is going to last. I suspect that it's going to be a bit longer than what management thinks. See, they announced this past week that instead of giving us a cost of living raise, they're going to be giving people a one-time bonus. Reaction of the employees wasn't exactly one of being thrilled. I'm sure that once the bonus checks are cut, which I think is going to be in 2 weeks, a number of people will quit. If they even wait that long, which means that I'll have to put in more overtime. Not that I'm complaining as I need the money, but I'd rather I didn't have to put in so much overtime to get it. Haven't heard any more from Tasha, but I did notice that she's updated her Facebook status to say that she's in a relationship, and this time it's with a human being instead of one of her hallucinations, so she might actually be on medication. I don't know. And now, I suppose, before we get to Skullbeard and I reading from Hex and Hammer, I should address the whole issue with the presidential debate the other night. First and foremost, anybody who hasn't made up their mind as to who they're going to vote for after January 6th, 2021 isn't a serious thinker when it comes to politics. We've known since November of 2020 who was going to be running in 2024. And if you haven't been able to make up your mind in the 4 fucking years since then, I don't know what to tell you. As for those folks who are screaming that Biden needs to drop out, I have just one question. Do you know what it will take to replace him on the ticket? Because I'm betting you don't. There's nothing in the DNC rules or the law on how to handle such a situation. In fact, there are a number of laws that make replacing Biden extremely difficult, if not impossible, in some states. I'll admit that it is a bit surprising that the incumbent candidate isn't automatically placed on the election ballot for the election. It's generally easier for the incumbent to be placed on the ballot, but there's still a process by which it has to be done. That takes time and money. Oh, And in some states, like Ohio, that process has to be completed before the date of the DNC convention. Next, there's the question of who that replacement would be. Good luck in trying to hold primaries again before the general election. Even if you could manage to pull that off, you'll have to have another convention to formalize all of that stuff. And that's expensive, not to mention unlikely to be easy to accomplish. If you, say, let the delegates at the convention pick who's going to be the nominee, you'll still have the issue of getting that candidate on the ballot, not to mention all the people who are upset that their preferred candidate didn't get picked. You'll notice that nobody's saying Kamala Harris should be the one running for president. Lastly, if Biden's not fit to run for a second term, then he's not fit to continue being president. For better or worse, Biden's going to have to be the nominee. And if we want to have a chance at democracy continuing in this country, he has to win re-election. November is still a long way off in political terms, and at this point in 2012, Romney was polling better than Obama. Finally, it being the first of the month, I want to thank everyone who supported this show on Patreon. I really do appreciate it, especially since Fuzznuts is going to have to go to the doctor for a checkup this month, and that'll put at least a small dent in the vet bill. Now, the content that you've all been waiting for. Skullbeard and I with more Hex and Hammer. But if I were to tell all the instances that were found in that one town, I should need to make a book of them. Yeah, you'd think that God would treat it like he did Sodom and Gomorrah, and just smite the whole thing off the face of the earth, but apparently not.
We should be so lucky.
God, it killed this guy. Apparently. For countless men and women who were blind or lame or withered or plagued with various infirmities, severally took their oath that they had strong suspicions that their illnesses, both in general and in particular, were caused by witches, and that they were bound to endure those ills either for a period or right up to their deaths. And all that they said, and all that they said and testified was true, either as regards a specified illness or as regards a specified illness. No, you did not have a stroke. It repeated itself. Or as regards the death of others. For that country abounds in henchmen and knights who have leisure for vice and seduce women, and then wish to cast them off when they desire to marry an honest woman. But they can rarely do this without incurring the vengeance of some witchcraft upon themselves or their wives, for when those women see themselves despised, they persist in tormenting not so much the husband as the wife, in the fond hope that if the wife should die, the husband would return to his former mistress.
Yep. Witches be trippin'.
Mm-hmm.
For when a cook of the Archduke had married an honest girl from a foreign country, a witch who had been his mistress met them in the public road, and in the hearing of other honest people foretold the bewitching and death of the girl, stretching out her hand and saying, "Not for long will you rejoice in your husband." And at once, on the following day, she took to her bed, and after a few days paid the debt of all flesh, exclaiming just as she expired, "Lo, thus I die, because that woman, with God's permission, has killed me by her witchcraft. Yet verily I go to another and better marriage with God." Yeah. Okay, sure. Whatever.
In the same way, according to the evidence of public support, in the same way, according to the evidence of public report, a certain soldier was slain by witchcraft, and many others whom I omit to mention, of course. And I'll go ahead and read the next one, since that was just one short sentence. But among them there was a well-known gentleman whom his mistress wished to come to her on one occasion to pass the night, but he sent his servant to tell her that he could not visit her that night because he was busy. She promptly flew into a rage and said to the servant, "Go and tell your master that he will not trouble me for long." On the very next day, he was taken ill and was buried within a week.
Uh-huh. And there are witches... Now?
No, mind you, there are, amongst the Australian Aborigines, there is the belief that if a shaman, one of their shamans, points a sharpened kangaroo bone at you, you will be dead in a very short period of time. And for psychosomatic reasons, that often happens.
Okay.
So, that could be something similar here.
Could be. And there are witches who can bewitch their judge by a mere look or glance from their eyes and publicly boast that they cannot be punished. And when malefactors have been imprisoned for their crimes and exposed to the severest torture to make them tell the truth, these witches can endow them with such an obstinacy of preserving silence that they are unable to lay bare their crimes.
I forget who that comic is who says, you just threaten me with torture and I'll tell you anything you want to know. And there are some who, in order to accomplish their evil charms and spells, beat and stab the crucifix and utter the filthiest words against the purity of the most glorious Virgin Mary. I did it that way because it's in all caps. Casting the foulest aspersions on the nativity of our Savior from her inviolate womb. It is not expedient to repeat those vile words. Damn, I really wanted to hear some 16th century obscenities, nor yet to describe their detestable crimes, as the narrative would give too great offense to the ears of the pious. Well, I ain't pious, buddy, so go ahead and spill it. But they are all kept and preserved in writing, detailing the manner in which a certain baptized Jewess, oh goody, we get some anti-Semitism here, had instructed other young girls. And one of them, named Walpurgis, really want to know what the English equivalent of that name is. Being in the same year at the point of death and being urged by those who stood around her to confess her sins, exclaimed, "I have given myself body and soul to the devil. There is no hope of forgiveness for me," and so died.
These particulars have not been written to the shame, but rather to the praise and glory of the most illustrious Archduke, for he was truly a Catholic prince and labored very zealously with the church at Brixen to exterminate witches. But they are written rather in hate and loathing of so great a crime, and that men may not cease to avenge their wrongs, and the insults and offences these wretches offer to the Creator and our holy faith, to say nothing of the temporal losses which they have. For this is their greatest and gravest crime, namely, that they abjure the faith.
Oh, my friend, we have hit the mother lode of
batshittery?
Fun stuff.
Oh, sweet zombie savior on a stick.
Because I looked up Walpurgis, because I wanted to see what an English translation of that would be. And I discovered something that I have never heard of in my entire life.
Okay.
And given all the shit I've done, you'd figure I'd have heard about it. Because it pulls up, the big hit you get is Walpurgis Night. Or since it's German, I guess it should be Walpurgis Night. Or Walpurgis Nacht. It is the Northern European version of Halloween.
Oh, nice.
And it's in April.
Oh, perfect.
And it's named after Saint Walpurga, who was canonized on May Day in 1870. Nice. And she was hailed by the Christians of Germany for battling pest, rabies, and whooping cough, as well against witchcraft.
Wait, she wasn't canonized in 1870. She was canonized in 870.
Yes.
Okay.
May 1st. May Day.
Nice.
Although they did not call it that. So, by naming this person Walpurgis, that seems to indicate that they were a witch.
Wait. I thought that Walpurga was fighting against witchcraft.
Right, but this Walpurgis is named ironically.
Oh, okay.
These particulars have not been written to the shame, but rather to the praise and glory of the most illustrious Archduke. For he was truly a Catholic prince and labored very zealously with the church at Brixen to exterminate witches. But they are written rather in hate and loathing of so great a crime, and that men may not cease to avenge their wrongs and the insults and offenses these wretches offer to the Creator and our holy faith, to say nothing of the temporal losses which they cause, again, time travel. For this is their greatest and gravest crime, namely that they abjure the faith. No idea who the fuck that prince might have been.
No idea. Part 2, question 1, chapter 13?
Yep.
How witch midwives commit most horrid crimes when they either kill children or offer them to devils in most accursed wise?
Yep.
Fuck. We must not omit to mention the injuries done to children by witch midwives, first by killing them, and secondly by blasphemously offering them to devils. In the Diocese of Strasbourg, in the town of Zabern, there is an honest woman very devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary, who tells the following experience of hers to all the guests that come to the tavern which she keeps, known by the sign of the Black Eagle.
I was, she says, pregnant by my lawful husband, now dead, and as my time approached, a certain midwife importuned me to engage her to assist at the birth of my child, but I knew her bad reputation, and although I had decided to engage another woman, pretended with conciliatory words to agree to her request. But when the pains came upon me, and I had brought in another midwife, the first one was very angry, and hardly a week later came into my room one night with 2 other women and approached the bed where I was lying. And when I tried to call my husband, who was sleeping in another room, all the use was taken away from my limbs and tongue, so that except for seeing and hearing, I could not move a muscle. And the witch, standing between the other 2, said, "See, this vile woman who would not take me for her midwife shall not win through unpunished." The other 2 standing by her pleaded for me, saying, "She has never harmed any of us." But the witch added, "Because she has offended me, I am going to put something into her entrails. But to please you, she shall be tortured enough." So she came up and touched my belly with her hands, and it seemed to me that she took out my entrails and put in something which, however, I could not see. And when they had gone away and I had recovered my power of speech, I called my husband as soon as possible and told him what had happened. but he put it down to pregnancy and said, "You pregnant women are always suffering from fancies and delusions." And when he would by no means believe me, I replied, "I have been given 6 months' grace, and if after that time no torment comes to me, I shall believe you."
She related this to her son, a cleric who was then archdeacon of the district and who came to visit her on the same day, and what happened. When exactly 6 months had passed, such a terrible pain came into her belly that she could not help disturbing everybody with her cries day and night. And because, as has been said, she was most devout to the Virgin, the Queen of Mercy, she fasted with bread and water every Saturday, so that she believed that she was delivered by her intercession. For one day, when she wanted to perform an action of nature, all those unclean things fell from her body, and she called her husband and son and said, "Are those fancies? Did I not say that after a half a year the truth would be known? Or whoever saw me ear, thorn, bones, and even bits of wood? For there were brambles as long as a palm, as well as a quantity of other things." Sounds kinky.
There was... I don't remember if it was this far back, but it was, a couple 100 years ago at the very least, where this woman claimed to be giving birth to rabbits.
Ah, yes, I believe I heard about this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Playing hide bugs?
Yeah. Moreover, as was said in the first part of the work, it was shown by the confession of the servant who was brought to judgment at Brissac that the greatest injuries to the faith as regards the heresy of witches are done by midwives. And this is made clearer than daylight itself by the confessions of some who were afterwards burned. Or maybe it was because doctors just wanted to kick the women out so they can make all the money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like...
that's part of it.
Forceps.
Yep.
The salad spoons that they sometimes... those were invented in Italy in like the 1600s. Mm-hmm. And they were a family secret. So if you were going to give birth and you wanted the best chance to survive, you hired this one family of doctors and midwives. And the mother and everybody would be cordoned off by a curtain. So they couldn't see what the doctor was using to help with the birth. And, I forget how long it remained the family secret, but it's like, how many people died because of that shit?
Yeah. We are not the smartest species out there. For in the Diocese of Basel, at the town of Dan, a witch who was burned confessed that she had killed more than 40 children by sticking a needle through the crowns of their head into their brains as they came out from the womb. I think you'd notice that.
Yeah. Finally, another woman in the Diocese of Strasbourg confessed that she had killed more children than she could count. And she was caught in this way. She had been called from one town to another to act as midwife to a certain woman, and having performed her office, was going back home. But as she went out of the town gate, the arm of a newly born child fell out of the cloak she had wrapped around her, in whose folds the arm had been concealed. This was seen by those who were sitting in the gateway, and when she had gone on, they picked it from the ground, what they took to be a piece of meat. But when they looked more closely and saw that it was not a piece of meat, but recognized it by its fingers as a child's arm, they reported it to the magistrates, and it was found that a child had died before baptism, lacking an arm. So the witch was taken and questioned and confessed to the crime, and that she had, as has been said before, killed more children than she could count.
It's quite the story.
Yeah.
Now, the reasons for such practices is as follows. It is to be presumed that witches are compelled to do such things at the command of evil spirits, and sometimes against their own wills. For the devil knows that because of the pain of loss or original sin, such children are debarred from entering the kingdom of heaven, and by this means the last judgment is delayed, when the devils will be condemned to eternal torture, since the number of the elect is more slowly completed, on the fulfillment of which the world would be consumed. And also, as has already been shown, witches are taught by the devil to confect from the limbs of such children an unguent which is very useful for their spells.
So, in short, Catholics want to ban abortion because that means Armageddon will happen sooner.
Oh, is that what they're up to?
Yeah.
No, but they're... Okay, there's a couple of keywords in here, like elect, kingdom of heaven. They sound really Baptist, like maybe even Calvinist. So it doesn't really matter what the fuck you do. This is all preordained.
Right.
But you still got free will, but it's already planned. Which makes no sense whatsoever.
God's just waiting until he gets the right number of people in heaven to wipe everybody else out. Which, that doesn't make any sense, but...
Well, according to some people, like the JWs, it's only 144,000. So, if heaven ain't full by now...
it ain't gonna be full.
What the fuck?
But in order to bring so great a sin into utter detestation, we must not pass over in silence the following horrible crime. For when they do not kill the child, they blasphemously offer it to the devil in this manner. As soon as the child is born, the midwife, if the mother herself is not a witch, carries it out of the room on the pretext of warming it, raises it up, and offers it to the prince of devils, that is Lucifer, and to all the devils, and this is done by the kitchen fire. Unlike the African tradition where you take the child outside and hold it up to the stars.
Or the Lion King where you just take him and hold him up in the sun. Whatever.
Yeah.
A certain man relates that he noticed that his wife, when her time came to give birth, against the usual custom of women in childbirth, did not allow any woman to approach the bed except her own daughter, who acted as a midwife. Wishing to know the reason for this, he hid himself in the house and saw the whole order of the sacrilege and dedication to the devil, as it has been described. He saw also, as it seemed to him, that without any human support, but by the power of the devil, the child was climbing up the chain by which the cooking pots were suspended. In great consternation both at the terrible words of the invocation of the devils and at the other iniquitous ceremonies, he strongly insisted that the child should be baptized immediately. While it was being carried to the next village, where there was a church, and when they had to cross a bridge over a certain river, he drew his sword and ran at his daughter, who was carrying the child, saying in the hearing of two others who were with them, "You shall not carry the child over the bridge, for either it must cross the bridge by itself, or you shall be drowned in the river." The daughter was terrified, and together with the other women in company, asked him if he were in his right mind, for he had hidden what had happened from all the others except the two men who were with him. Then he answered, "You vile drab, by your magic arts you made the child climb the chains in the kitchen. Now make it cross the bridge with no one carrying it, or I shall drown you in the river." And so, being compelled, she put the child down on the bridge and invoked the devil by her art, and suddenly the child was seen on the other side of the bridge. And when the child had been baptized and he had returned home, since he now had witness to convict his daughter of witchcraft, for he could not prove the former crime of the oblation of the devil, inasmuch as he had been the only witness of the sacrilegious ritual, he accused both daughter and mother before the judge after the period of purgation, and they were both burned, and the crimes of midwives of making that sacrilegious offering was discovered. Holy fuck, that's a long paragraph.
And dark.
Mm-hmm. And if she floats, she's a witch.
Butter anyway. Get your back up. But here the doubt arises. Oh, just now?
Yeah, just now. Sure.
To what end or purpose is the sacrilegious offering of children, and how does it benefit the devils? To this, it can be said that the devils do this for 3 reasons, which serve 3 most wicked purposes. The first reason arises from their pride, which always increases, as it is said, "They that hate thee have lifted up the head." For they try as far as possible to conform with divine rites and ceremonies. Secondly, they can more easily deceive men under the mask of an outwardly seeming pious action. For in the same way they entice young virgins and boys into their power, for though they might solicit by such means of evil and corrupt men, yet they rather deceive them by magic mirrors and reflections seen in witches' fingernails, and lure them on in the belief that they love chastity, whereas they hate it. For the devil hates above all the Blessed Virgin because she bruised his head.
I want to hear this story.
Yeah. Just so, in this oblation of children, they deceive the minds of witches into the vice of infidelity under the appearance of a virtuous acts. And the third reason is that the perfidy of witches may grow to the devil's own gain when they have witches dedicated to them from their very cradles. And all of this happens with God's permission.
Yeah. Yup. Okay, so the link there goes to Genesis. In a Misitatius Panem... Yeah, whatever. Give me the translation. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and she will crush your head, and you will be ensnared by her heel." Sounds kinky. It's like Findom shit, or what? Yeah. And this sacrilege affects the child in 3 ways. In the first place, visible offerings to God are made of visible things, such as wine, of bread, or the fruits of the earth, as a sign of honor and subjection to him. As it is said in Ecclesiasticus 25, "Thou shalt not appear empty before the Lord." Bitch, it's Sunday, where my money? "And such offerings cannot and must not afterward be put to profane use. Therefore, the Holy Father, St. John Damascene, says, the oblations which are offered in the church belong only to the priests, but not that they should divert them to their own uses, but that they should faithfully distribute them, partly in the observance of divine worship and partly for the use of the poor. From this it follows that a child who has been offered to the devil in sign of subjection and homage to him cannot possibly be dedicated by Catholics to a holy life in worthy and fruitful service to God for the benefit of himself and others." Whatever.
So, first of all, wine of bread, that would be beer, would it not?
Yes.
And secondly, so if the devil gets the kid first, church can do nothing to get the kid back.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like the God isn't all that powerful.
Right?
I'm just saying.
But it was his idea in the first place. Or at least he signed off on it.
Yeah.
Rubber stamped it.
For who can say that the sins of the mothers and of other do not rebound in punishment upon the children? Perhaps someone will quote that saying of the prophet, "The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father." But there is that other passage in Exodus 20. "I am a jealous God, visiting the sins of the father upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation." Now the meaning of these two sayings is as follows. The first speaks of spiritual punishment in the judgment of heaven or God, and not in the judgment of men. and this is the punishment of the soul, such as loss or the forfeiture of glory, or the punishment of pain, that is, of the torment of eternal fire. And with such punishments no one is punished except for his own sin, either inherited as original sin or committed as actual sin.
Huh. Oh, that's some third-rate apologetics right there.
Yeah.
A little bit of mental gymnastics. The second text speaks of those who imitate the sins of their father, as Gratian has explained. Gratian? Maybe? 1Q4, etc. And there he gives other explanations as to how the judgment of God inflicts other punishments on a man, not only for his own sins which he has committed, or which he might commit, thought crimes, but is prevented by punishment from committing, but also for the sins of others. Gratian, the little that is known concerning the author of Concordantia Discordantium Canonum, more generally called the Decretum Gratiani, must be gathered from the work itself. Gratian was born in Italy, perhaps as Chiusi. He became a Camaldolese monk and taught at Bologna. In Bologna? It is uncertain at what time he compiled the Decretum, but is commonly held to have been completed in 1151. More recent authorities, however, inclined to suggest 1140. He died in 1179, maybe 1160. He's regarded as the true found of the science of canon law. Oh. Okay. Attribution. It's all his fault.
And it cannot be argued that when a man is punished without cause and without sin, which should be the cause of the punishment. For according to the rule of law, no one must be punished without sin unless there is some cause of punishment. And we can say that there is always a most just cause, though it may not be known to us. See St. Augustine 24:4. And if we cannot, in the result, penetrate the depth of God's judgment, yet we know that what he has said is true and what he has done is just.
Now, how do
Shut
we know
up,
that?
Don't ask questions.
Yep, exactly. But there is this distinction to be observed in innocent children who are offered to devils not by their mothers when they are witches, but by midwives who, as we have said, secretly take from the embrace and the womb of an honest mother. Such children are not so cut off from the grace that they must necessarily become prone to such crimes, but it is piously to be believed that they may rather cultivate their mother's virtues. Okay.
Yeah. The second result to the children of this sacrilege is as follows. When a man offers himself as a sacrifice to God, he recognizes God as his beginning and his end. And this sacrifice is more worthy than all external sacrifices which he makes, having its beginning in his creation and its end in his glorification. As it is said, a sacrifice to God is an afflicted spirit, etc. And in the same way, when a witch offers a child to the devil, she commends it body and soul to him as its beginning and its end in eternal damnation. Wherefore, not without some miracle can the child be set free from the payment of so great a debt. Psalm 119 is where that's evidently sourced from.
Oh. I was going to say, sounds like damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yep.
Pretty much. And we read often in the history of children whom their mothers, in some passion or mental disturbance, have unthinkingly offered to the devil from the very womb, and how it is only with the greatest difficulty that they can, when they have grown to adult age, be delivered from the bondage that the devil has, with God's permission, usurped to himself. With God's permission. And of this, the Book of Examples, Most Blessed Virgin Mary, affords many illustrations, a notable instance being that of the man whom the Supreme Pontiff was unable to deliver from the torments of the devil, But at last he was sent to a holy man living in the east, and finally, with great difficulty, was delivered from his bondage through the intercessions of the most glorious Virgin herself.
Yeah, and if you believe that...
I have beachfront property.
Mm-hmm. And if God so severely punishes even such a thoughtless, I will not say sacrifice, but commendation used angrily by a mother when her husband, after copulating with her, says, "I hope a child will come of it," and she answers, "May the child go to the devil," how much greater must the punishment be when the divine majesty is offended in the way we have described?
God, I hate the diss.
It's gibberish.
It is. The third effect of the sacrilegious oblation is to inculcate an habitual inclination to cast spells upon men, animals, and the fruits of the earth. This is shown by St. Thomas in the second book, Quest 108, where he speaks of temporal punishment, how some are punished for the sins of others. For he says that, bodily speaking, sons are part of their father's possessions, and servants and animals belong to their masters. Therefore, when a man is punished in all his possessions, it follows that often the sons suffer for the fathers.
That's a dick move if I ever heard one.
Yeah.
Minding your own business, living a good life. But because your dad fucked some shit up, now you gotta suffer.
Yep. Happens all the time.
Yep. And this is quite a different matter from what has been said about God visiting the sins of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. For there it is a question of those who imitate their fathers' sins, but here we speak of those who suffer instead of their fathers, when they do not imitate their sins by committing them, in fact, but only inherit the results of their sins. For in this way, the son born to David in adultery died very soon, and the animals of the
Amalekites.
Amalekites were ordered to be killed. Nevertheless, there is much mystery in all this.
Yeah, that was kill them all except for the little girls. You can keep those for yourselves. And their donkeys, and their goats, and their sheep, and their everything. Because merciful God. Taking into consideration all that we have said, we may well conclude that such children are always, up to the end of their lives, predisposed to the perpetration of witchcraft. For just as God sanctifies that which is dedicated to him, as is proved by the deeds of the saints, when parents offer to God the fruit which they have generated, so also the devil does not cease to infect with evil that which is offered to him. Many examples can be found in the Old and New Testaments, for so were many of the patriarchs and prophets such as Isaac, Samuel, and Samson, and so were Alexis and Nicholas, and many more guided by much grace to a holy life. Ooh, Saint Alexis. Blah, blah, blah. Not much of a footnote.
Finally, we know from experience that the daughters of witches are always suspected of similar practices as imitators of their mother's crimes, and that indeed the whole of a witch's progeny is infected. And the reason for this, and for all that has been said before, is that according to their pact with the devil, they always have to leave behind them and carefully instruct the survivors so that they may fulfill their vow to do all they can to increase the number of witches. For how else could it happen, as it has very often been found that tender girls of 8 or 10 years have raised up tempests and hailstorms unless they had been dedicated to the devil under such a pact by their mothers. Okay. So that seems to say, if you give them to the devil, they won't destroy shit.
Yep.
For For the children could not do such things of themselves by abjuring the faith, which is how all adult witches have to begin, since they have no knowledge of any single article of the faith. We will recount an example of such a child. Ooh, and here's a nice little footnote. Number of witches. Francesco Maria Guazza, Compendium Maleficarum, Milan, 1608, tells us that the witches promised the devil to strive with all their power and to use every inducement and endeavor to draw other men and women to their detestable practices and the worship of Satan. So in the case of Janet Redhide of Aldern, it was her husband who enticed her into that craft. Pitcairn, Criminal Trials, Edinburgh, 1833. At Salem,
there we go.
Yeah, George Burroughs, a minister, was accused by a large number of women as the person who had seduced and compelled them into the snares of witchcraft. See My History of Witchcraft, Chapter 3, pages 83 to 84. And I believe he was the one who started reciting the Lord's Prayer when they went to execute him, and rather than saying, oh, shit, if he can recite the Lord's Prayer, then he's not a witch. He said, hurry up and kill him, hurry up and kill him.
But of course, they're never wrong. In the Duchy of Swabia, a certain farmer went to his fields with his little daughter, hardly 8 years old, to look at his crops and began complaining about the drought, saying, alas, when will it rain? The girl heard him, and in the simplicity of her heart said, Father, if you want it to rain, I can soon make it come. And her father said to her, what? Do you know how to make it rain? And the girl answered, no, I can make it rain, and I can make hailstorms and tempests too. And the father asked, who taught you? And she answered, my mother did, but she told me not to tell anybody. Then the father asked, how did she teach you? And she answered, she sent me to a master who will do anything I ask at any time. But her father said, have you ever seen him? And she said, I have sometimes seen men coming in and out of my mother. And when I asked her who they were, she told that they were our masters to whom she had given me, and that they were powerful and rich patrons. The father was terrified, and asked her if she could raise a hailstorm then. And the girl said, yes, if I had a little water. Then he led the girl by the hand to a stream, and said, do it, but only on our land. Then the girl put her hand in the water and stirred it in the name of her master, as her mother had taught her, and behold, the rain fell only on that land. Seeing this, the father said, make it hail now, but only on one of our fields. And when the girl had done this, the father was convinced by the evidence, and accused his wife before the judge. And the wife was taken and convicted and burned, but the daughter was reconciled and solemnly dedicated to God, since which hour she could no more work these spells and charms. Or maybe she could never do it in the first fucking place, because witchcraft is bullshit.
Yeah. Part 2, Question 1, Chapter 14.
Yay.
Here followeth how witches injure cattle in various ways. When St. Paul said, doth God care for oxen? He meant that, though all things are subject to divine providence, both man and beast each in its degree, as the psalmist says, yet the sons of men are especially in his governance and under the protection of his wings. I say, therefore, if men are injured by witches, with God's permission, both the innocent and the just, as well as sinners, and if parents are bewitched in their children, as being part of their possessions, who can then presume to doubt that, with God's permission, various injuries can be brought up by witches upon cattle and the fruits of the earth, which are also part of men's possessions? For so was Job stricken by the devil and lost all his cattle. So also there is not even the smallest farm where women do not injure each other's cows by drying up their milk and very often killing them. Again, with God's permission. So, fuck him.
Yep. But first let us consider the smallest of these injuries, that of drying up the milk. If it is asked how they can do this, it can be answered that according to Blessed Albert in his book on animals, milk is naturally menstrual in any animal, and like another flux in women, when it is not stopped by some natural infirmity, it is due to witchcraft that it is stopped. Now, the flow of milk is naturally stopped when the animal becomes pregnant, and it is stopped by an accidental infirmity when the animal eats some herb, the nature of which is to dry up the milk and make the cow ill. And I gotta mention, I don't think they understand how milk is produced.
No.
Not at all. We know better.
Yeah. And I will just say that I have, thanks to Twitter, discovered that, oh yes, if a trans woman takes enough estrogen, she will lactate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, if you take enough steroids, you will grow breasts, and they will be capable of lactation. It happens.
If Bob had bitch tits.
Mm-hmm. That too.
That's a line from Fight Club.
Okay, it's been an awfully long time since I've seen it, but I should watch it again because I'm interested in making soap. But whatever. Not that kind of soap.
But they can cause this in various ways by witchcraft. For on the more holy nights, according to the instructions of the devil, and for the greater offense to the divine majesty of God, a witch will sit down in a corner of her house with a pail between her legs, stick a knife or some instrument into the wall or a post, and make as if to milk it with her hands. Then she summons her familiar who always works with her in everything and tells him that she wishes to milk a certain cow from a certain house, which is healthy and abounding in milk. And suddenly the devil takes the milk from the udder of that cow and brings it to where the witch is sitting, as if it were flowing from the knife.
Uh-huh. I think I may have seen a documentary with this exact plot on one of the tubes.
Yeah.
But when this is publicly preached to the people, they get no bad information by it, for however much anyone may invoke the devil and think that by this alone he can do this thing, he deceives himself, because he is without the foundation of that perfidy, with not having rendered homage to the devil or abjured the faith. I have set this down because some have thought that several of the matter of which I have written ought not to be preacher to the people on account of the danger of giving them evil knowledge, whereas it is impossible for anyone to learn from a preacher how to perform any of the things that have been mentioned. But they have been written rather to bring so great a crime into detestation, and should be preached from the pulpit, so that judges may be more eager to punish the horrible crime of the abnegation of the faith. Yet they should not always be preached in this way, for the secular mind pays more attention to temporal losses, becoming more concerned with earthly than spiritual matters. Therefore, when witches can be accused of inflicting temporal loss, judges are more zealous to punish them. But who can fathom the cunning of the devil? God did it.
And this is what the future Republicans want for America.
Uh-huh.
I know of some men in a certain city who wish to eat some May butter one May time. What the
Not gonna kink shame, but okay.
He's just wondering if it was like Smurf language, Smurf this, Smurf that.
Or Marklar.
And as they were walking along, they came to a meadow and sat down by a stream. And one of them, who had formed some open or tacit pact with the devil, said, "I will get you the best May butter." And at once he took off his clothes and went into the stream, not standing up, but sitting with his back against the current. And while the others looked on, he uttered certain words, and moved the water with his hands behind his back. And in a short time, he brought on a great quantity of butter of the sort that the country women sell in the market in May. And the others tasted it and declared it was the very best butter. Butt butter?
Yeah, it's...
I think we've got a show title.
Maybe he was smuggling butter. I don't know.
I don't really want to know.
I don't want to know. From this, we can deduce first the following facts concerning their practices. They are either true witches by reason of an expressed pact formed with the devil, or they know by some tacit understanding that the devil will do what they ask. In the first case, there is no need for any discussion, for such are true witches. But in the second case, then they owe the devil's help in the fact that they were blasphemously offered to the devil by a midwife or by their own mothers. Okay.
But it may be objected that the devil perhaps brought the butter without any compact, expressed or tacit, and without any previous dedication to himself. It is answered that no one can ever use the devil's help in such matters without invoking him, and that by that very act of seeking help from the devil he is an apostate from the faith. This is the decision of St. Thomas in the second book of Sentences, Dist, I don't remember what that stands for, 8, on the question, whether it is apostate from the faith to use the devil's help. And although Blessed Albert the Great agrees with the other doctors, yet he says more expressly that in such matters there is always apostate either in word or in deed. For if invocations, conjurations, fumigations, and adorations are used, then an open pact is formed with the devil, even if there has been no surrender of the body and soul together with explicit adjuration of the faith, either wholly or in part. And I have no idea what the fuck they're trying to say with that sentence. For by the mere invocation of the devil, a man commits open verbal apostasy. But if there is no spoken invocation, but only a bare action from which follows something that could not be done without the devil's help, then whether a man does it be beginning in the name of the devil, or with some other unknown words, or without any words, but with that intention, then, says Blessed Albert, it is apostasy of deed, because that action is looked for from the devil, but since to expect to receive anything from the devil is always a disparagement of the faith, it is also apostasy.
Yeah, apostasy.
Yeah.
This is just so bad.
hey, but at least it's not written in Rastafarian.
Oh, thank fuck. So it is concluded that, by whatever means that sorcerer procured the butter, it was done with either a tacit or an expressed pact with the devil. And since, if it had been with an expressed pact, he would have behaved after the usual manner of witches, it is probably that there was a tacit or secret pact originating either from himself or from his mother or a midwife. And I say that it arose from himself, since he only went through certain motions and expected the devil to produce the effect. So heads you win, tails I lose.
The second conclusion we can draw from this and similar practices is this. The devil cannot create new species of things. Therefore, when natural butter suddenly came out of the water, the devil did not do this by changing the water into milk, but by taking butter from some place where it was kept and bringing it to the man's hand. Or else he took natural milk as opposed to unnatural milk from a natural cow as opposed to an unnatural cow, and suddenly churned it into a natural butter, again, as opposed to an unnatural butter. For while the art of woman takes little time to make butter, the devil could do it in the shortest space of time and bring it to men.
Man, they would flip their shit over margarine.
Oh, God.
It's witchcraft.
Yeah, the history of margarine is really fascinating.
Devilry. May cause anal leakage. It is in the same way that certain dealers in magic, when they find themselves in need of wine or some such necessity, merely go out in the night with a flask or vessel and bring it back suddenly filled with wine. For then the devil takes natural wine from some vessel and fills their flasks for them. Maybe he's got a bottle hidden out on the porch. You never know.
Yeah. And with regard to the manner whereby witches kill animals and cattle, it should be said that they act very much as they do in the case of men. They can bewitch them by a touch and a look, or by a look only, or by placing under the threshold of the stable door or near the place where they go to water some charm or periapt of witchcraft.
Okay, not sure what a periapt is, but... For in this way those witches who were burned in Ratisbon, of whom we shall say more later on, were always incited by the devil to bewitch the best horses and the fattest cattle. And when they were asked how they did so, one of them, named Agnes, said that they hid certain things under the threshold of the stable door. And asked what sort of things, she said, the bones of different kinds of animals. She was further asked, in whose name they did this, and answered, in the name of the devil and all the other devils. And there was another of them named Anna, who had killed 23 horses in succession, belonging to one of the citizens, who was a carrier. This person at last, when he had bought his 24th horse and reduced to extreme poverty, stood in his stable and said to the witch who was standing in the door of her house, See, I have bought a horse, and I swear to God and his holy mother that if this horse dies, I shall kill you with my own hands. At that, the witch was frightened and left the horse alone. But when she was taken and asked how she had done these things, she answered that she had done nothing but dig a little hole, after which the devil had put in it certain things unknown to her. From this, it is concluded that the witch cooperates sufficiently, if it is only a touch or a look, for the devil to permit no power of injuring creatures without some cooperation on the part of the witch, as has been shown before, and this is for the great offense of the divine majesty. Nice story, bro.
Yeah. For shepherds have often seen animals in the fields give 3 or 4 jumps in the air and then suddenly fall to the ground and die. And this is caused by the power of witches at the instance of the devil.
Obviously.
Yeah.
In the diocese of Strasbourg, between the town of Feisen and Mount Ferrer, a certain very rich man affirmed that more than 40 oxen and cows belonging to him and others had been bewitched in the Alps within the space of 1 year, and that there had been no natural plague or sickness to cause it. To prove this, he said that when cattle die from some change, plague, or disease, they do not do so all at once, but by degrees. But that this witchcraft had suddenly taken all the strength from them, and therefore everyone judged that they had been killed by witchcraft. I have said 40 head of cattle, and I believe he put the number higher than that. However, it is very true that many cattle are said to have been bewitched in some districts, especially in the Alps, and it is known that this form of witchcraft is unhappily most widespread. We shall consider some similar cases later in the chapters where we discuss the remedies for cattle that have been bewitched. Fucking hell.
Yeah, oh God, what's her name? I can remember her first name, but I cannot remember her last name. She was in the original Bewitched TV series. Played Samantha. Elizabeth Montgomery. That's it.
Okay.
She befriended Keith Olbermann, the sports and political reporter.
Yep.
And he was talking about how they met on a plane in I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. And he said it was, amazing because they'd be on the plane. They were on the plane, and people would come up and say, "I'm sorry, this bother you, a big fan. Can you do that thing with your nose?" And, once they'd settled down, he asked her, "Why do you do that?" And she goes, "How old were those people?" And he says, "Well, they're all like in their early 20s. "Right. And when did the show go off?" "About 30 years ago." "Right. So that means they watched it in reruns, which means Lizzie gets a check." So, every time they ask, I wiggle my nose because Lizzie gets a check that way.
Nice. Oh my goodness. Part 2, question 1, chapter 15. How they raise and stir up hailstorms and tempests and cause lightning to blast both men and beasts. Sweet.
North wind blow! South wind blow! That devils and their disciples can, by witchcraft, cause lightnings and hailstorms and tempests. Oh my. And that the devils have power from God to do this, and their disciples do so with God's permission. Gotta ask, why is he giving it to them? Is proved by Holy Scripture in Job 1 and 2. For the devil received power from God and immediately caused it to happen that the Sabeans took away from Job 50 yoke of oxen and 500 asses. And then fire came from heaven and consumed 7,000 camels. And a great wind came and smote down this house, killing his 7 sons and his 3 daughters, and all the young men, that is to say, the servants, slaves, except him who brought the news, were killed. And finally the devil smote the body of the holy man with the most terrible sores, and caused his wife and his 3 friends to vex him grievously. And I just found out that you can buy a camel for about $1,000.
Really?
Yeah.
What's it take to get it? Like, what's the shipping cost? That's where they get you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I am an Amazon Prime member.
Ooh. Oh, fuck. Now I have to.
What are you looking?
Amazon.ca. Camel. Oh, yes, and Prime. There we go. I don't know if you can buy a live camel on Prime. Doesn't look like it.
I was reading on Blue Sky, somebody posted something about, when they would get bored at a particular job, they would Google how much it would cost to own an exotic animal. And geez. I don't know why. I'm like, I wonder what a camel costs. And so I Googled that, and they run about $1,000 from various camel breeders in the U.S.
Oh, they're domestic camels.
Yeah, well, yeah. They don't have to be imported.
Okay.
You know what? And you know what's really neat is around the time of the Civil War, the U.S. government said, instead of using horses out in the western deserts, let's get a bunch of camels. And they tried that, and for whatever, I guess because the railroad came, they were like, fuck it. And they just turned them all loose.
Cut them loose.
And
nice.
Up until like the 1930s, there were still some feral in Texas. And that was the last anybody saw of them. However, you know what they have feral now in Texas?
Wild hogs? Wild pigs?
Ostriches.
Ostriches? Really?
Yeah, because in the late 80s, there was this big scam going around that, ostrich is going to be the next big meat. And so they got all these people to buy ostrich farms. Well, it didn't take off. And so you know what the farmers did with their ostriches?
Just
Open
cut
the
'em
gate
loose.
and let them out.
Yeah. Fuck all y'all. Okay. Huh. That I did not know.
Yeah.
St. Thomas, in his commentary on Job, says as follows: "It must be confessed that with God's permission, the devils can disturb the air, raise up winds, make the fire fall from the heaven." All with God's permission. For although, in the matter of taking various shapes, corporeal nature is not at the command of any angel, either good or bad, but only at that of God the Creator, yet in the matter of local motion, corporeal nature has to obey the spiritual nature. And this truth is clearly exemplified in man himself, for at the mere command of the will, which exists subjectively in the soul, the limbs are moved to perform that which they have been willed to do. Therefore, whatever can be accomplished by mere local motion...
Everybody do the local motion.
Come on. Yeah. Do the local motion with me. Therefore, whatever can be accomplished by mere local motion, this not only good but bad spirits can do by their natural powers accomplish, unless God should forbid it. But wind and rain and other similar disturbances of the air can be caused by the mere movement of vapors released from the earth or the water. Therefore, the natural power of devils is sufficient to cause such things. So says St. Thomas.
God.
I'm an amateur. No, I'm not an amateur. I am actually an amateur, but I seem to be a bit of an anarchist, and I do not recognize his authority.
Yeah. For God, in his justice, using the devils as his agents of punishment, inflicts the evils which come to us who live in this world. Therefore, with reference to that in the Psalms, he called a famine on the land and wasted all their substance of bread. The gloss says, God allowed this evil to be caused by the bad angels who are in charge of such matters. And by famine is meant the angel in charge of famine.
Isn't that one of the 4 horse people?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We refer the reader also to what has been written above on the question as to whether witches must always have the devil's help to aid them in their works, and considering the 3 kinds of harm which the devils at times inflict without the agency of a witch. But the devils are more eager to injure men with the help of a witch, since in this way God is the more offended, and greater power is given to them to torment and punish. Man, this God character, he's got this real...
I think it's a kink.
Yeah, I think so. It's like,
because...
here's the power. Oh, I'm so offended. Here's more power.
Oh.
Please, sir, can I have some more? Right? What the fuck?
Well, now you think about it, he did have himself self-nailed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's got a real bondage kink.
He sacrificed himself to himself. Yeah, for a loophole?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And relevant to this subject is what the doctors, who have written in the second book of Sentences, Dist 6, on the question whether there is a special place assigned to the bad angels in the clouds of the air. For in devils there are 3 things to be considered: their nature, their duty, and their sin, and by nature they belong to the empyrean of heaven, through sin to the lower hell, but by reason of the duty assigned to them, as we have said, as ministers of punishment to the wicked and trial to the good, their place is in the clouds of the air. For they do not dwell here with us on the earth, lest they should plague us too much, but in the air and around the fiery sphere, they can so bring together the active and passive agents that when God permits, they can bring down fire and lightning from heaven.
Wait. These are bad angels, so they're up in the air. They're not devils, because they're not in the ground. So you got good and bad angels in the air. Interesting. Hell's got an air force.
Yeah.
A story is told in the Formicarius of a certain man who had been taken and was asked by the judge how they went about to raise up hailstorms and tempests, and whether it was easy for them to do so. He answered, "We can easily cause hailstorms, but we cannot do all the harm that we wish because of the guardianship of good angels." And he added, "We can only injure those who are deprived of God's help, and we cannot hurt those who make the sign of the cross. And this is how we got to work. First, we use certain words in the fields to implore the chief of the devils to send one of his servants to strike the man whom we name. Then, when the devil has come, we sacrifice to him a black cock at 2 crossroads, throwing it up into the air, and when the devil has received this, he performs our wish and stirs up the air, but not always in the places which we have named, and according to the permission of the living God, sends down hailstorms and lightnings." Just like Thor and Odin and
Zeus.
Zeus. Yeah, another guy living on top of a mountain, chucking lightning bolts.
A story is told in the Formicarius of a certain man.
I just read that one.
Oh, I thought you.
Yeah,
Wow.
they sacrificed a black cock at 2 crossroads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I missed. Not. I don't know.
Shit happens.
Yeah. In the same work, we hear of a certain leader or heresiarch.
Heresiarch? I don't know.
Yeah. So is he higher or lower ranked than Maudib?
Good question.
Of which is named Stauffer. There's a frozen food company named that, if I'm not mistaken.
Stofers?
Who
Yeah.
lived in Bern and the adjacent country and used publicly to boast that whenever he liked, he could change himself into a mouse in the sight of his rivals and slip through the hands of his deadly enemies, and that he had often escaped from the hands of his mortal foes in this manner. But when the divine justice wished to put an end to his wickedness, some of his enemies lay in wait for him cautiously and saw him sitting in a basket near a window and suddenly pierced him through with swords and spears so that he miserably died for his crimes. Yet he left behind him a disciple named Hoppo, who had also for his master that Stadlin whom we have mentioned before in the 6th chapter. And I do not remember Stadlin, and I am not even going to...
Drawing a blank, and I couldn't find the 6th chapter if I wanted to.
Yeah.
These two could... Oh, I just gotta say, J.K. Rowling totally fucking stole that for Peter Pettigrew. The guy who turns into a fucking rat to get away. These two could, whenever they pleased, cause the third part of the manure or straw or corn to pass invisibly from a neighbor's field to their own. Sure somebody's not just stealing your fucking straw or your corn or whatever. They could raise the most violent hailstorm, and destructive winds and lightning could cast onto the water in the sight of their parents' children walking by the waterside when there was no one else in sight, could cause barrenness in men and animals, could reveal hidden things to others, could in many ways injure men in their affairs or their bodies, could at times kill whom they would by lightning, and could cause many other plagues, when and where the justice of God permitted such things to be done. Wait, justice of God? And he's letting shit like this slide.
Yeah.
Seems like
It is better to add an instance which came within our own experience. For in the Diocese of Constance, 28 German miles...
from the town of 28
I've
German
never
miles.
heard of German miles.
Will sell just a little bit better than your American miles.
And not in Poland committing war crimes. From the town of Ratisbon in the direction of Salzburg, a violent hailstorm destroyed all the fruit crops and vineyards in a belt 1 mile wide, so that the vines hardly bore fruit for 3 years. This was brought to the notice of the Inquisition.
What a show.
Since the people clamored for an inquiry to be held, many beside all the townsmen being of the opinion that it was caused by witchcraft. Accordingly, it was agreed after 15 days' formal deliberation that it was a case of witchcraft for us to consider, and among a large number of suspects, we particularly examined 2 women, one named Agnes, a Bath woman, and the other Anna von Mindelheim. These 2 were taken and shut up separately in different prisons, neither of them knowing in the least what had happened to the other. On the following day, the Bath woman was very gently questioned in the presence of a notary by the chief magistrate, a justice named Galeret, very zealous for the faith, and by the other magistrates with him. And although she was undoubtedly well provided with the evil gift of silence, which is the constant bane of judges, and at the first trial affirmed that she was innocent of any crime against man or woman, yet in the divine mercy that so great a crime should not pass unpunished, suddenly, when she had been freed from her chains, although it was in the torture chamber...
Yeah, that's what...
that seems to be a clue. She fully laid bare all the crimes which she had committed. For when she was questioned by the notary of the Inquisition upon the accusations which had been brought against her of harm done to men and cattle, by reason of which she had been gravely suspected of being a witch, although there had been no witness to prove that she had abjured the faith or performed coitus with an incubus devil, for she had been most secret. Nevertheless, after she had confessed to the harm which she had caused to animals and men, she acknowledged also all that she was asked concerning the abjuration of the faith and copulation committed with an incubus devil, saying that for more than 18 years she had given her body to an incubus devil with a complete abnegation of the faith. The fact that she was only 14 at the time did not figure in
Obviously.
Yeah.
So, I don't live in Tornado Alley, but are they not associated with hailstorms? And do they not leave a path of destruction? Maybe up to a mile wide?
Yep, they're rare in Europe, but they have happened.
Oh, get used to it. It'll be more...
Global warming, baby.
Climate change.
No, that's the Bush term for it. To make it sound more natural and less alarming.
Well, there is that. But it's more accurately described as something else entirely. But, I can just see why they want to push global warming is bullshit when we could just blame these witches.
Yeah.
Right? After this, she was asked... I wonder if this is after more gentle questioning. In the torture chamber in fucking chains. After this, she was asked whether she knew anything about the hailstorm, which we have mentioned, and answered that she did. And being asked how and in what ways, she answered, I was in my house, and at midday a familiar came to me and told me to go with a little water onto the field or plain of Kupel, for so it is named, and when I asked what he wanted to do with the water, he said that he wanted to make it rain. So I went out a town gate and found the devil standing under a tree. The judge asked her, under which tree? And she said, under that one opposite that tower, pointing it out. Asked what she did under the tree, she said, the devil told me to dig a hole and pour the water into it. Asked whether they say down together, she said, I sat down, and the devil stood up. Then she was, with what words and in what manner she had stirred the water, and she answered, I stirred it with my fingers, and called on the name of the devil himself and all the other devils. Again the judge asked what was done with the water, and she answered, it disappeared, and the devil took it up into the air. Then she was asked if she had any associate, and answered, under another tree opposite, I had a companion, naming the other captured witch, Anna van Mindelheim. but I do not know what she did. Finally, the bathwoman was asked how long it was between the taking up of the water and the hailstorm, and she answered, "There was just sufficient interval of time to allow me to get back to my house." And all of a sudden...
But, and this is remarkable, when on the next day the other witch had at first been exposed to the very gentlest questions, being suspended hardly clear of the ground by her thumb.
I love how they say the quiet part out loud. Gentlest question.
Been set quite free, she disclosed the whole matter without the slightest discrepancy from what the other had told, agreeing as to the place that it was under such a tree, and the other had been under another, as to the method, namely of stirring water poured into a hole in the name of the devil and all the devils, and as to the interval of time that the hailstorm had come after her devil had taken the water up into the air and she had returned home. Yeah, so, Goody von Mitzelpixel, or whatever your name is, were you under a tree opposite of Anna when she dug a hole, poured some water in it, stirred?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading questions. You're leading the witness.
Yeah. Somehow I don't think she had a defense attorney.
No. He may have been suspended by his thumbs.
Yeah. Accordingly, on the third day they were burned, and the bathwoman was contrite and confessed and commended herself to God, saying that she would die with a willing heart if she could escape the tortures of the devil, and held in her hand a cross which she kissed. But the other witch scorned her for doing so, and this one had consorted with an incubus devil for more than 20 years with a complete abjuration of the faith, and had done far more harm than the former, which to men, cattle, and the fruits of the earth, as is shown in the preserved record of their trial. In other words, she said, I ain't doing this shit because you're going to kill me either way, so fuck it.
These instances must serve, since indeed countless examples of this sort of mischief have been recounted. But very often men and beasts in storehouses are struck by lightning by the power of devils, and the cause of this seems to be more hidden and ambiguous, since it often appears to happen by divine permission without the cooperation of any witch. However, it has been found that witches freely confess that they have done such things, and there are various instances of it which could be mentioned in addition to what has already been said. Therefore, it is reasonable to conclude that just as easily as they raise hailstorms, so can they cause lightning and storms at sea. And so, no doubt at all remains on these points. I wish I had their strength of conviction or whatever, that I'm right, this is right.
That's it for this episode of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes. It's also on Stitcher, and most of the episodes are on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter at TParkAtheist, and it's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist. You can email me at trailerparkatheist@gmail.com. Show notes can be found at tparkatheist.blogspot.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to donate to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show's notes page. You can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker.
The podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fosnuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.